what could have been and wasted potential. Yes, time and time again, us comic book fans are presented with the promise of a new movie universe, the promise of an amazing series that is going to be long lasting. However, more often than not, that series or that movie trilogy ends up getting cut short. A lot of times with unresolved questions, cliffhangers, and almost every single time we know where the story was going to go, whether it's the creators, writers, or the actors involved, do end up sharing what the initial story was. And that's why on this channel, I have started a series called What Could Have Been and Wasted Potential, where I bring you all the examples of comic book shows, comic book movie universes that ended, in my opinion, way too early. And they had so much potential to be even greater than they were, especially the ones that left us with some pretty epic cliffhangers, and we never got a chance as fans to see their full vision realized. That being said, two of the ones that I have talked about in the past, Young Justice and Teen Titans, definitely have a chance of happening. Some of the ones that I talk about in this series have no chance. Either way, it's really a bummer, but that brings me to the topic of today's video, because today we are talking about one that, in my opinion, has more of a chance of returning and coming to fruition than Teen Titans Season 6, Young Justice Season 5, or any other project I will likely ever talk about on this channel. And that's because today we're talking Spider-Man the Animated Series Season 6. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, Spider-Man the Animated Series, also referred to as Spider-Man 1994. I know I refer to it most commonly as that. This, to me, is the greatest Spider-Man show we've ever gotten. But not only that, the best representation we've ever had in any media source for the character of Spider-Man. He is translated straight from the comics to a T, has every single characteristic and personality trait that you want from your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And I am also including live action, animation, everything. This show and this character is the epitome of understanding a character and understanding how to properly bring all of his characteristics to the screen in a really amazing way. This series brought us so many amazing different storylines, different characters, relationships between characters, and they really did tackle some pretty big issues. And one common theme to me in Spider-Man, and no matter what project you're talking about, is the concept of loss. And this Peter Parker went through a tremendous amount of loss, sorrow, sadness, even depression at one point. And seeing such a beloved character go through this and bringing him down to such a human level is one of my absolute favorite things this series did. But what if I told you they had an entire Season 6 planned, fully conceptualized, and so much so that they even left us with a cliffhanger in Season 5. Yes, if you remember correctly, obviously Season 5 was a bit all over the place. They had that Secret Wars dynamic, then you had the Electro storyline where Captain America does return, and then Spider-Man goes back home, or what he thinks is his home. It ends up being a different reality. We get our first ever look on screen at a Spider-Verse type storyline where they do fight the Hobgoblin and the Green Goblin, and also Spider-Carnage, an evil version of Peter Parker. Now, the really important thing here is Madam Web is the one that requests him to do this on behalf of the Beyonder. After Spider-Man proved himself on Secret Wars, the Spider-Man we're used to in our universe, he's the only one who proved capable to be the leader of this team. So they do end up facing off against Spider-Carnage. After a while, they do end up defeating him. And once that's done, Madam Web takes him to see Stan Lee, a universe in which Spider-Man is just a comic book character. And after he meets Stan Lee, has that really cool cameo, really cool interaction between those two characters. Even though Stan Lee was a real person, Spider-Man did realize that in that universe he was just a character, but in his universe, he is obviously Spider-Man, a real person. That being said, the episode ends with not Madam Web taking him back home. Madam Web says, "We're going to find the real Mary Jane Watson." And it leaves off with them going off into the multiverse on a search for MJ. Now, thankfully, because of X-Men 97, we do know that he eventually does find her. However, the process in which they have to go through to find her isn't revealed to us. Because unfortunately, season 6 got canceled from the network. They didn't want to support the budget that this show did want to go on, which is really lame considering how popular this show was. At the time this show was airing, it was airing at the tail end of Batman the Animated Series and also Superman the Animated Series right in its heyday, and it was bringing in numbers comparable to both those series. Both those series are considered top comic book shows. Again, same with this one. So the fact that they decided to cancel it is a real big shame. However, the fact that X-Men 97 did return definitely gives hopes to myself and other fans out there that season 6 could be on our horizon much sooner than anyone would have thought, especially because a lot of people thought it would never happen. That being said, obviously we do know the big overarching storyline, at least for the beginning of season 6, would have been Madam Web and Spider-Man traveling to different universes in the hopes to find Mary Jane. Now, I did find one of the key points on here was that they weren't going to find anyone they were going to bring back with them aside from Mary Jane Watson. So even if they encountered a Miles Morales type character or another Ben Reilly, that character was not going to come back with them, at least at this time in this season. Doesn't say anything about a potential season 7 or if future plans would have had that. However, that being said, I do appreciate this universe just wanting to focus on Peter Parker's Spider-Man. I know we have a lot of different storylines out there where you do introduce Miles or Ben Reilly or even Gwen Stacy as another spider person to work alongside Peter, but this one is definitely focused just around Peter Parker, and I do really like that because Spider-Man, Peter Parker, he is my favorite superhero of all time. So, I obviously would not complain about that. That being said, it would have been about a 4-episode arc, seeing them go to different universes, seeing Spider-Man interact with different heroes, and even some different versions of heroes he's already met, like some of the Avengers, would have seen him meeting the Incredible Hulk, which, again, those dynamics on screen, especially with this version of Spider-Man, would have been really awesome. He would have eventually found Mary Jane, they would have rekindled their relationship, and immediately he would have revealed his identity to Mary Jane. Now this is a pretty pivotal point because if you watch the show, you know in season 4, he does reveal his identity to Mary Jane. However, that ends up being revealed to be a clone created by Miles Warren. So, obviously, the real MJ, his MJ, does not know. But for him, he already took that leap of faith and had trust in her to reveal himself. And that's why, to me, I really like the fact that right away he takes off his mask, or was going to take off his mask, and tell her, hey, I'm Spider-Man, this is Peter, I lost you once, I can't do that again. Because we had that realization in the episode with Mysterio where he reveals his identity to the clone. So the fact that they were going to plan for him to do this right away with the real MJ is really awesome. We don't need to see him go through the debate of telling her, not telling her. No, tell her. She needs to know. And again, that way you can see their relationship progress in the direction that it really should, especially by that point. Now, that being said, it does also detail that in them returning to their universe, part of the portal would have remained open. Now, this is really important because we know someone else who was trapped in the same universe, or at least in somewhat of the same universe that she was, and that's Norman Osborn. So Norman Osborn was going to return, and he was going to retake up the mantle of Green Goblin. Now, as we know, Harry was the Green Goblin by this point in the story. However, he did end up getting talked down and was okay going in for mental treatment. So this would have seen Norman trying to convince Harry to go crazy again, and for a little bit it would have worked. However, between Harry, MJ, and Peter, they would have been able to reconcile all of their differences, and especially when Harry realizes Peter is indeed Spider-Man, he would have forgiven him. Now, this would have led to Norman going crazy, and he was going to end up offing one of them. It wasn't going to be Spider-Man. Mary Jane we would have already seen. That's happened twice technically in this series. So it was going to be Harry Osborn in somewhat of a sacrificial type of way where he's trying to protect either MJ or Peter, which would have been really poetic and would have brought his character so much redemption, especially for this series. So I'm really bummed out we didn't get to see that. Obviously, I always love anything with the Green Goblin and any type of death of Mary Jane or death of Gwen Stacy type of storyline, and that's really what this feels like. That being said, we do have some other characters that were set to appear, one of which was going to be Mysterio. As you know, in season 4, in that episode I mentioned, Mysterio did technically die. However, right before his death, it was going to be revealed that he actually got sucked into another dimension by Dormammu, an extra-dimensional being who, again, is normally associated with Doctor Strange, and he did appear in this series in 2 other episodes in a crossover with Doctor Strange. So the fact they were going to have him return again just to further his vendetta with Spider-Man, because as we know, he does have a grudge in this universe against Spider-Man, because Spider-Man on multiple occasions totally screwed over his plans. So the fact we were going to get a Mysterio powered up by Dormammu fighting against Spider-Man would have been awesome. And I know you might think, well, how could Spider-Man stand up against those odds, even in his own show? Well, don't worry, it wasn't going to be just Spider-Man. Ghost Rider was set to appear in those episodes. It was going to be about 2 to 3 episodes in that storyline and would have showed us Ghost Rider versus Spider-Man in a brief moment. But then when they realized they are on the same side, they would have teamed up together to take on Dormammu and Mysterio, end up defeating them. Again, that would have been such an awesome team up to see and a really awesome battle sequence. And seeing the dynamic between Ghost Rider and Spider-Man would have been really cool. To my knowledge, we never got Ghost Rider in any type of animated capacity, at least in the 90s, aside from his brief appearance in Fantastic Four, I believe when he was helping to take down Galactus. I believe that's the episode he appears in. That being said, getting another Marvel character to appear in Spider-Man the Animated Series would have been really cool. In my opinion, that is the series that includes the most heroes when it's just centered around one character. They did the Fantastic Four, War Machine, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Daredevil. Again, so many characters, and I'm still leaving some out. So the fact we were going to get yet another character would have been really, really cool, and is a huge shame that we never ended up getting that. That being said, some of the other details, they're not as major. We would have seen a couple new villains, one being the Beetle, and one being Sandman. Now, Sandman is a much more mainstream villain than Beetle, but it says that those two would return and be part of a newly formed Sinister Six. Now, would this be a result of Wilson Fisk after he was injured coming back for revenge? Or with Wilson Fisk taken out, would Silvermane or someone else try to take up power and use the Sinister Six to do that? It doesn't really say, however, either way it would have been really cool. Another character that they teased possibly doing, or at least setting up for future seasons, was Martin Lee. Now again, it doesn't have him listed as Mr. Negative, so in my opinion, he was just going to be a character similar to Dr. Connors, where he just appears as either a businessman or a scientist that then eventually does become that supervillain known as Mr. Negative. But even if he didn't become Mr. Negative, it still would have been a really, really cool cameo and really cool to see what they could have been setting up for the future. But that is pretty much everything we know about what was supposed to be for Season 6 of Spider-Man the Animated Series. Let me know what all of you think. Which of these storylines would you have liked to see most? And which are you most sad that we might not ever get to see? And would you like it if Disney and Marvel decided to bring this show back similarly to how they did X-Men 97? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.